Liam Neeson arrived alone at one of the most luxurious events of the year and was treated like a complete nobody, ignored, dismissed, humiliated. But what no one expected was that Richard Gere saw everything. And when he walked into that ballroom silently, the entire night turned upside down. Watch until the end to find out what Liam did next, a gesture so powerful it left the entire elite speechless. It was the kind of evening most people only dreamed about. A black-tie gala hosted in one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues, lit by chandeliers that had seen the rise and fall of empires. The kind of place where names mattered more than faces and where recognition was currency. Liam Neeson arrived alone. No entourage, no assistant trailing behind him with a phone glued to their ear. No one to announce his presence or make space for him. Just a tall man in a dark suit, stepping out of a modest black sedan under the soft glow of the entrance lights. He adjusted his collar against the winter air, nodded politely to the valet, and made his way through the golden doors. Inside, the lobby pulsed with opulence. Waiters floated like shadows carrying champagne, and the air buzzed with rehearsed laughter. But as Liam stepped through, something happened, or rather didn't happen. No one looked up, no one turned. It was as if the moment he walked in, he had turned invisible. He paused briefly at the check-in table. The woman behind the tablet glanced at him, then tilted her head, unsure. She tapped the screen. A few seconds passed, then a full minute. Her brows furrowed. She asked for his name again. He repeated it, calmly, politely. Her eyes scanned the guest list again, slower this time, but with no change in expression. She didn't recognize him. Not as the man who had headlined blockbusters for decades, not as the actor whose voice had delivered some of the most iconic lines in cinema. To her, he was just another aging man in a suit, possibly someone's driver who'd wandered in by mistake. Behind him, a new wave of arrivals swept through. Producers, tech CEOs, actors half his age with double the followers. Their entrances met with camera flashes and sycophantic greetings. Liam stepped slightly to the side, waiting patiently as another couple was whisked through with warm smiles. Still, the tablet didn't yield his name. The hostess hesitated, then offered a tight smile, the kind that said, "Please wait over there." She gestured toward the far side of the lobby, near a marble column, out of sight from the cameras. Liam nodded once and moved, his footsteps quiet against the polished floor. Minutes passed. He leaned against the cool stone and watched the circus unfold. Women in dresses that shimmered like galaxies. Men shaking hands with a tension so precise it could shatter glass. Conversations laced with strategy and status. No one looked in his direction, not once. He wasn't angry. There was a calmness about him, the kind that only years and heartbreak could shape. But there was also a quiet ache in the air around him, not for the lack of attention, but for the hollowness of the room itself. The desperate performances, the empty charisma, the loudness masking insecurity. He folded his hands behind his back, observing. Occasionally someone would glance his way, their eyes narrowing as if trying to place him, only to look past him moments later. One man even asked him where the restroom was. Liam simply nodded and pointed. They didn't know who he was. Or maybe they did and didn't care. Fame fades fast when it doesn't scream for attention. And Liam never screamed. He stood there, composed, elegant, timeless, not with the pride of a celebrity, but with the quiet dignity of a man who knew who he was. A man who didn't need their validation to exist. But the silence lingered, and in that silence something else grew. A tension, a subtle weight in the air. As if the room itself had missed something. As if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for a correction. He glanced toward the ballroom entrance. Inside, the gala had begun. The music drifted out in gentle waves. The MC's voice echoed faintly, introducing guests who were showered with applause. Still, He stood, waiting, and that's when it happened. The door behind him swung open, not with drama, not with noise, but with presence. A man walked in with the ease of someone who had nothing left to prove. Silver hair, a soft gaze, and the unmistakable grace of a man who had aged into his soul. Richard Gere. He didn't pause for photos. He didn't look for the spotlight. He simply scanned the lobby, and his eyes stopped, right on Liam. There was no hesitation, no confusion, just recognition, immediate and absolute. And before the murmurs could begin, before the cameras turned, before the air shifted, he stepped toward him. And in that instant, the noise of the gala seemed to dissolve. Because the moment Richard Gere reached out his hand, everything and everyone was about to change. The moment Richard Gere stepped forward, the air in the lobby shifted, not dramatically, but definitively. It was subtle at first, a slight lull in the background noise, a glance from one guest that turned into two. And then suddenly, the chatter dulled, the laughter faded, and the weight of something real began to pull the room toward a new center. He didn't announce himself. He didn't ask questions. He just walked with intent, toward the man leaning quietly against the marble column, toward Liam Neeson. And as he approached, the hush grew heavier. For a second, only the soft steps of polished shoes echoed off the stone floor. Then came the recognition, the quiet gasp from someone near the entryway, the click of a photographer's camera, a whisper that spread like electricity. "Is that—" Richard reached Liam, placed a hand on his shoulder, and embraced him with the warmth of old friendship, not performative, not for the cameras, but true. Two men who had seen the industry at its highest and lowest points, who had walked through fire and still carried grace in their silence. The effect was immediate. People who moments ago had ignored Liam now couldn't stop staring. Phones subtly emerged. Heads turned, and those who had dismissed him just minutes earlier now shifted uncomfortably in their spots, unsure of what to make of the unfolding scene. Richard leaned back slightly, studying Liam for a moment, then turned his head toward the reception desk. He said nothing, but his expression said everything. Within seconds, a new hostess appeared, nervous, apologetic. She tapped furiously at her tablet. Chairs were moved, a table was readjusted. And just like that, the man they had forgotten was now the center of their stage. Richard motioned for Liam to walk with him. And they did, side by side, through the very doors that had once denied him, into the ballroom, past the guests who had pretended not to see him, and this time every step echoed with something different: respect. Inside, the room buzzed with curiosity. The live music faltered slightly. The MC paused. A few of the younger celebrities squinted, clearly confused. But the older ones, the ones who had worked, who had suffered, who had earned every wrinkle, they understood, and they nodded quietly. At their table, Richard gestured for a seat to be brought for Liam, not across from him, but beside him. It wasn't a seat at the table, it was a statement. The rest of the evening continued. Speeches were given, auction items were introduced, toasts were made. But something was different now, a shift in hierarchy, a disruption of vanity. And though Liam remained silent, his presence spoke louder than any of the voices on stage. Then came the unscheduled moment. Richard was asked to say a few words. He stood, slowly. He didn't unfold a paper, didn't prepare a monologue. He simply held the microphone with steady hands and glanced toward Liam, and what he said next would become one of the most talked about moments of the night, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was true. He told a story, not about money or fame, not about power or prestige, but about a moment, decades ago, when he was just starting, when doors were still closed and names didn't carry weight. He told them about a time he'd nearly quit, broken and overlooked, until one man, a stranger at the time, had pulled him aside and spoken words he would never forget. That man was Liam. He spoke of kindness, of dignity, of integrity that didn't ask to be seen. And as he spoke, the room fell completely still. Gone were the chuckles and the glasses clinking. Gone was the performative applause. In that moment, there was only presence. There was only listening. Some guests lowered their eyes, suddenly aware of their own silence earlier that evening. Others leaned forward, captivated. When Richard finished, he didn't ask for applause. He simply returned the microphone, walked back to his seat, and laid a hand on Liam's shoulder. And then, something unexpected happened. Liam stood, not to speak, not to correct, not to reclaim, but because what needed to be said had already been said. And yet, what he did next would leave the room breathless. Without saying a word, Liam began to walk, not toward the stage, not toward the cameras, but toward the exit, leaving behind something that would soon shake everyone to their core. Liam moved slowly through the ballroom, each step deliberate, each movement untouched by urgency. He didn't glance at the cameras. He didn't look to the tables now filled with uneasy eyes. He didn't acknowledge the sudden wave of polite smiles or subtle nods. He simply walked, head held high, posture composed, carrying with him a silence louder than anything that had been said that night. There was something sacred in the way he moved, not out of bitterness, not to make a statement, but as if he were finally ready to leave behind a room that had already revealed its truth. As he neared the double doors at the back of the gala, a waiter passed by, young, overworked, invisible to most. Liam stopped, reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim white envelope, sealed, without name or markings. He handed it to the young man with a quiet nod and walked away. No one knew what was inside, no speech, no farewell, no spotlight. And yet, that envelope would echo far beyond that evening. Because hours later, when the event was over and the guests had scattered into the night, whispers began to circle. The envelope had found its way to the event's director. Inside was a personal check, a donation larger than anything made that night, quiet, anonymous, unattached to recognition. And it had come from the man who was almost denied entry. By morning, the media had caught the scent. Stories began to surface. Liam Neeson's silent gift, the gesture no one saw coming, a masterclass in grace. But even as headlines tried to catch up, Liam remained unreachable. He wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't responding to calls. And he wasn't posting statements, because some messages don't need words. Back at the venue, the staff spoke of him in awe. The security guard who'd once overlooked him now confessed he hadn't known who he was, but would never forget the look in his eyes. The hostess from the check-in desk asked to write him a letter of apology, and the guests, many of them had gone home unsettled, not by drama, but by dignity. It was a different kind of power, the kind that didn't need applause, the kind that didn't raise its voice. And yet it had reached everyone. Later that week, Richard Gere was asked in an interview why he had stepped in that night. He smiled, leaned forward and said simply, "Because you don't stay silent when a giant is being ignored." That moment, those few words, spread like wildfire. But for Liam, there was no need to explain. He had nothing to prove, nothing to reclaim. The world had watched. And more importantly, the world had learned. Not from a confrontation, not from a speech, but from silence and what a man chooses to carry in it. Liam didn't need the room to change to feel at peace with himself. But somehow, without saying a word, he changed the room. In a world where voices fight to be the loudest, Liam Neeson reminded everyone that true strength walks softly. And that night, the loudest echo came from a man who said nothing at all. If this story moved you as much as it impacted everyone in that room, leave a comment below and tell us what touched you the most. Share this video with someone who believes in the power of respect and humility. And of course, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we bring you new, real, or inspired stories to remind you that there is still greatness in quiet gestures. See you in the next video.